The lesson continued as alien soldiers learned what humans had always known: that determination and adaptability could overcome any technological disadvantage, and that the most advanced weapon in the universe was a soldier who would never stop fighting. In the end, the galaxy's military forces learned something valuable from their human allies. Technology was important, but it was only as good as the warrior who wielded it. And sometimes the most primitive equipment, in the hands of someone who refused to give up, could accomplish what the most advanced weapons could not. The aftermath of the battle brought in silence to the moon's surface that felt almost sacred. Smoke rose from the destroyed Void Swarm facility while scattered pieces of defeated constructs reflected the pale light from distant stars. Human soldiers moved through the wreckage with practiced efficiency, checking for survivors and securing any remaining threats. Lieutenant Jae-hyun stood beside the fallen destroyer, its massive bulk now nothing more than twisted metal and failing electronics. Around him, his soldiers tended to their wounds and counted their remaining ammunition. Every piece of equipment showed battle damage. Every armor suit bore scars from energy weapons and flying debris. But every human soldier was still alive and ready to continue fighting if necessary. The sound of approaching footsteps made Jae-hyun turn toward the facility's main entrance. General Vexthon emerged from the smoke, his crystalline body no longer gleaming with its previous perfection. Cracks ran through his transparent skin where energy feedback had damaged his molecular structure, and his movements lacked the fluid grace he had displayed during the initial assault. Behind the general came the surviving members of his Crystal Warrior strike team. Where 50 Althari soldiers had entered the facility, only 12 emerged. Their advanced armor showed signs of catastrophic system failures, and their molecular disruptors hung silent and powerless at their sides. These were the elite forces of the Galactic Vanguard, reduced to refugees by an enemy that had turned their own technology against them. War Marshal Zixtar followed with the remnants of her Krelin shock troops. The insectoid warriors who had mocked human equipment just hours earlier now moved with the careful steps of soldiers who had learned the difference between technological superiority and tactical effectiveness. Their nano-enhanced exoskeletons sparked occasionally, damaged beyond their system's ability to repair. General Vexthon approached Lieutenant Jae-hyun slowly, his glowing eyes fixed on the destroyed destroyer construct. When he spoke, his voice carried none of the condescending amusement that had characterized his earlier communications. "Human Lieutenant," he said, the translator struggling with harmonics that suggested deep respect, "how did your forces accomplish what our advanced weapons could not?" Jae-hyun looked at the alien general, remembering the laughter that had filled the Galactic Council chamber when Captain So-young had demonstrated human equipment. Now that same equipment lay scattered across the battlefield, damaged and improvised but ultimately victorious. "General, our weapons work because they don't try to be perfect," Jae-hyun explained. "Your molecular disruptors and plasma weapons are incredibly advanced, but they follow predictable patterns. The Void constructs could analyze and counter them, because energy weapons obey specific physical laws." He gestured toward Corporal Tae-jun, who was helping Private Min-ho repair a damaged rifle using spare parts and improvised components. "But human weapons are unpredictable. A bullet's path changes because of wind, gravity, tiny imperfections in the metal. No computer can predict every variable, so no adaptive system can fully counter them." War Marshal Zixtar's mandibles clicked together, but this time the sound indicated thoughtful consideration rather than mockery. "Your tactics also proved unusual. When our forces encountered superior opposition, we attempted to withdraw and regroup using standard military doctrine. But your soldiers continued advancing despite taking casualties and equipment failures." "That's just how humans fight," Sergeant Yoon-ji said as she approached their position. Her armor showed multiple impact craters, and her left shoulder was bandaged where energy burns had penetrated her protection, but she walked with the steady confidence of a soldier who had never considered retreat as an option. "We learned a long, Time ago that the best technology in the world doesn't matter if you give up when things get difficult, she continued. Sometimes the only way to win is to keep fighting when everyone else thinks you should quit. General Vexthon extended one crystalline hand toward the human sergeant, a gesture of respect that translated across species barriers. Sergeant, I owe you and your soldiers an apology. We dismissed your capabilities based on our assumptions about technological advancement. We believed that superior equipment automatically meant superior soldiers. Lieutenant Yun Seo joined the group, walking, slowly due to her injuries but refusing medical assistance until her report was complete. Blood still seeped through her bandaged arm, and her damaged armor could barely maintain life support functions, but her voice remained clear and professional. General, with respect, technology is just a tool. The most important factor in any battle is the soldier using that tool. Our equipment might look primitive to your forces, but it's designed by humans for human warfare. We built it to work when everything else fails. She gestured toward Specialist He Jin, who was emerging from the destroyed facility with a detailed analysis of the Void Swarm's operational systems. Our specialists learned to improvise explosives from damaged equipment because human conflicts taught us that supply lines get cut and equipment gets destroyed. We adapt because we have to, not because we choose to. The conversation was interrupted by approaching footsteps as more alien survivors gathered around the human position. Representatives from a dozen different species looked at the human soldiers, with expressions that ranged from amazement to confusion. These were beings whose civilizations had mastered faster than light travel, molecular engineering, and weapons that could crack planets. But they had been defeated by an enemy that humans had destroyed using improvised tactics and stubborn determination. Commander Hyunwoo's voice crackled over the radio from the orbiting fleet. Ground teams, this is Fleet Command. Preliminary reports indicate complete success in all mission objectives. The Void Swarm facility has been neutralized, and no construct signals are detected within the system. General Vexthon activated his own communication system and transmitted a message that would reach every ship in the combined galactic fleet. Fleet Command, this is General Vexthon. Be advised that mission success was achieved primarily through the actions of Terran Defense Corps personnel. Human forces demonstrated tactical capabilities that exceeded all previous assessments. War Marshal. Zixtar added her own transmission. All Krelin units update tactical databases to reflect new evaluation of human military effectiveness. Previous classifications were incorrect. Human soldiers have proven themselves worthy of warrior caste. Recognition. The formal acknowledgments continued for several minutes as alien commanders updated their records and transmitted new assessments to their home governments. But for the human soldiers standing on the battlefield, the most important recognition came from the way their alien allies now looked at them. No more condescending glances or dismissive comments about primitive technology. Instead, there was respect earned through combat and proved through victory. 3 days later, Commander. Hyunwoo stood once again before the Galactic Council, but the chamber's atmosphere had changed completely. The circular tiers of seats were filled with alien representatives who listened with serious attention rather than barely concealed amusement. Honored council members, he began, I present the after-action report from the Kepler 442 operation. Human forces successfully neutralized the Void Swarm facility with minimal casualties and no equipment losses that could not be repaired through field maintenance. General Vexthon stood from his crystal throne, his body chiming with harmonics. That indicated formal respect. Commander Hyunwoo, the Galactic Council formally requests that Terran Defense Corps assume primary tactical command for all future operations against Void Swarm forces. Your species has demonstrated capabilities that complement and enhance the technological advantages of our combined forces. Captain So Young, who had endured mockery during the previous council session, now found herself surrounded by alien officers requesting detailed briefings on human tactical doctrines. The same equipment that had been dismissed as primitive was now being studied as the key to defeating an enemy that had adapted to counter every advanced weapon system in the galactic arsenal. But perhaps the most significant change came in the training facilities aboard the combined fleet vessels. Sergeant Yunji stood before a mixed class of human, Althari, and Kreelan soldiers, teaching them lessons that no military academy had ever included in their curriculum. The most important thing to remember, she told her students, is that technology fails. Equipment breaks, communications get jammed. When that happens, the only thing you can rely on is your training, your teammates, and your refusal to give up. An Althari crystal warrior raised one transparent hand. Sergeant, how do we maintain combat effectiveness when our molecular enhancement systems are non-functional? The same way human soldiers have always fought, Yunji replied with a slight smile. You improvise, you adapt, and you keep moving. Forward no matter how many hits you take, because sometimes the best technology is the warrior who refuses to quit. The destroyer's systems crashed for exactly 47 seconds. During that brief window of confusion, Lieutenant Yunseo reached the optimal position for her flanking attack. Blood seeped through her damaged armor where energy burns had penetrated. The ceramic plating and her left arm hung uselessly at her side, but her right hand still held her rifle with steady precision. She fired 6 shots in rapid succession, each bullet aimed at different power coupling points along the construct's rear armor. The projectiles struck with sharp metallic impacts, creating small craters in the adaptive plating. None of the shots penetrated deeply enough to cause critical damage, but they accomplished something more important than destruction. They forced the destroyer to divide its processing power between front and rear threats. Target is reconfiguring, Corporal Taejun called out as he sprinted across open ground toward the construct's left side. His improvised weapon bounced against his back with each step, the jury-rigged components holding together through determination and military grade. Tape. I need 30 more seconds to reach effective range. The massive war machine was adapting again, but now it faced a problem no algorithm could solve efficiently. Human attacks came from unpredictable directions, with constantly changing tactics. Every time its learning systems began to recognize a pattern, the humans would completely change their approach. Sergeant Yunji coordinated the chaos with hand signals and short radio bursts, knowing that extended communications would give the destroyer time to analyze their tactical discussions. She pointed toward Private Minho, who immediately began throwing metal debris at the construct's sensor array from a new position. The impacts created electronic noise that interfered with the machine's targeting systems. Specialist Hae-jin, "Are you in position?" Yunji asked through her helmet radio. "Affirmative, Sergeant." Hae-jin's voice came from somewhere inside the damaged facility structure, where she had been working her way through collapsed passages for the past 20 minutes. "I found their main power distribution center. It's heavily shielded, but I can make something that will get through." Hae-jin had been the squad's demolitions expert before the mission began, but now she was improvising explosives from damaged equipment and facility components. Her armor showed multiple impact craters from falling debris, and her breathing sounded labored through the radio, but she continued working with the methodical precision of someone who had never failed to complete an assigned task. The destroyer fired another volley of energy beams, this time trying to track multiple human positions simultaneously. But the soldiers were no longer where its sensors indicated they should be. Private Minho had moved to a new pile of debris. Taejun had changed direction twice during his approach, and Yunseo was advancing despite her injuries. "Contact front," Lieutenant Jae-hyun called from his position near the original landing zone. More constructs approaching from the facility interior. "Squad leaders, maintain pressure on primary target while I handle the reinforcements." Through the smoke and debris, additional void machines emerged from the facility's depths. These constructs moved differently than the earlier models, their behavior patterns modified by lessons learned from observing the battle. But they were still designed to counter advanced alien technology, not human improvisation. Jae-hyun met the approaching constructs with steady rifle fire, each shot carefully aimed at joints and sensor clusters. When his first magazine ran empty, he reloaded without taking cover, trusting his armor to absorb return fire while he maintained suppressive shooting. 2 constructs fell to his coordinated attack, but more were coming. "Sir, you're outnumbered," Sergeant Yoon-ji called over the radio. "Negative, Sergeant. Continue your assault on the primary target. I can handle these machines." Jae-hyun's voice carried the calm confidence of someone who had commanded human soldiers through impossible situations. "Human tactics work because we don't know when to quit." The destroyer's adaptive systems finally began processing the pattern of human behavior, but the conclusions made no logical sense. Every tactical analysis indicated that the human forces should have retreated or been eliminated by now. Their equipment was demonstrably inferior, their numbers were insufficient, and several soldiers were operating with significant injuries. But instead of withdrawing, they continued advancing. Tae-jun reached effective range for his improvised weapon just as the destroyer's sensors locked onto his position. Energy began building in the construct's primary weapon array, enough power to vaporize him instantly. But he had timed his approach to coincide with attacks from 3 other directions, forcing the machine to choose between multiple targets. It chose wrong. The destroyer fired at Private Minho's position, believing his thrown debris represented the greatest threat to its sensor systems. The energy beam vaporized the rocky outcropping where Minho had been hiding, but the soldier had already moved to a new position and was continuing his harassment attacks. Tae-jun fired his makeshift weapon at point-blank range. The improvised explosive punched through the destroyer's energy shielding and detonated against the power coupling junction. The blast was not large enough to destroy the massive construct, but it disrupted the energy flow to the adaptive armor systems along the machine's entire left side. For the first time since the battle began, the destroyer showed visible damage that its repair systems could not immediately fix. "Direct hit," Tae-jun reported. "Target's left side armor is down. All units concentrate fire on the damaged section." But the destroyer was still learning. Its remaining weapon systems swiveled toward Tae-jun's position with mechanical precision. At this range, there was no way for a human soldier to survive the return fire. That was when Specialist Hae-jin's voice came over the radio from deep inside the facility. "Fire in the hole!" The explosion shook the entire moon's surface. Hae-jin's improvised charges had found their target in the facility's main power core, sending feedback surges through every void construct connected to the central network. The destroyer's movements became erratic as power fluctuations confused its control systems. Lieutenant Yoon Seo seized the opportunity despite her injuries. She advanced on the construct's damaged side, firing her remaining ammunition into exposed power conduits and sensor arrays. Each shot was carefully placed to maximize system disruption rather than cosmetic damage. "All units, final assault," Sergeant Yoon-ji ordered. "Hit everything that glows, sparks, or moves. Don't stop shooting until that thing stops moving." The coordinated human attack came from 6 directions simultaneously. Rifle fire, improvised explosives, and thrown debris struck the destroyer faster than its damaged systems could process. The construct tried to adapt, but its learning algorithms were overloaded by the sheer chaos of human tactics. More importantly, the humans refused to stop fighting even when their equipment failed. When weapons jammed, they cleared them and continued shooting. When armor was breached, they used debris as cover and kept advancing. When communications were disrupted, they relied on tactical instincts developed through years of Earth military training. The destroyer fell with a grinding crash that echoed across the battlefield. Its adaptive armor flickered and died, leaving nothing but twisted metal and failing electronics. The most advanced war machine in Void Swarm service had been defeated by soldiers using equipment that most galactic species considered primitive. In the sudden silence that followed, Lieutenant Jae-hyun surveyed the battlefield. His human soldiers stood among the wreckage, their armor damaged and their weapons nearly exhausted, but still ready to continue fighting if necessary. They had proven something that no amount of advanced technology could replace: the human refusal to give up. The destroyer's confusion lasted exactly 12 seconds. Then its adaptive systems began processing the kinetic attacks in a completely different way. Instead of trying to predict bullet trajectories, it started reinforcing its armor plating and adjusting its movement patterns to minimize impact damage. The massive construct was learning, even from human weapons. Corporal Tae-jun fired 3 more shots at the machine's sensor cluster before a return blast of coherent energy melted half his rifle barrel. The weapon sparked and smoked in his hands, leaving him with a damaged piece of metal that could barely function as a club. Any rational soldier would have retreated or called for evacuation. Instead, Tae-jun did something that made every alien observer question their understanding of human behavior. He began taking apart his broken rifle with practiced efficiency, pulling components from his equipment belt to create something entirely new. The damaged barrel became a short-range scatter gun when he loaded it with multiple smaller bullets. A broken power cell from his armor's life support system became an improvised explosive when connected to spare ammunition. Within minutes, he had turned his destroyed weapon into something no military manual had ever described. "Tae-jun, what are you doing?" Sergeant Yoon-ji asked, still firing at the approaching destroyer with her intact rifle. "Making something that thing has never seen before," Tae-jun replied, loading his improvised weapon with a mixture of bullets, metal fragments, and explosive components. "If we keep using the same tactics, it will learn to counter them. But if we change faster than it can adapt..." The destroyer fired another energy beam that struck the rocky outcropping where the human squad had taken cover. The stone vaporized instantly, forcing them to move to new positions. But instead of retreating like the alien forces had done, the humans scattered in different directions and continued fighting. Private Minho found himself trapped behind a pile of debris with no clear retreat route. His rifle had taken damage from falling rocks, leaving him with limited ammunition and no backup weapon. The destroyer's sensors locked onto his position, and he could see energy building in one of its weapon ports. But Minho had spent 3 years as an engineer before joining the military. He understood systems and how they could be broken. While the destroyer charged its weapon, he grabbed a handful of metal fragments from the destroyed facility and began throwing them at the construct's sensor array. The thrown debris had no energy signature and followed completely random trajectories. Each piece of metal bounced off the destroyer's hull at unpredictable angles, creating noise in its sensor systems and forcing it to process thousands of tiny impacts. The machine's targeting system, designed to track energy weapons and guided projectiles, struggled to filter out the chaotic interference. "Everyone, throw rocks!" Minho shouted into his radio. "Throw anything you can find. Confuse its sensors." The human squad responded immediately. They grabbed debris, equipment parts, even pieces of their own damaged armor, and hurled them at the massive construct. None of the objects caused significant damage, but together they created a storm of unpredictable impacts that overwhelmed the destroyer's analytical capabilities. While the construct's sensors struggled with the chaos, Sergeant Yoon-ji spotted something the alien forces had missed. The destroyer's adaptive armor was incredibly sophisticated, but it required constant power to maintain its molecular-level restructuring. The power conduits that fed the armor systems were located just behind the main weapon ports, protected by energy shields but vulnerable to physical impact. "Tae-jun, can that improvised weapon of yours punch through energy shielding?" she asked. "Not through it," Tae-jun replied, studying his makeshift creation. "But energy shields work both ways. They keep energy out, but they also keep it in. If I can get an explosive charge inside the shield perimeter..." Yoon-ji understood immediately. "You need someone to create a distraction while you get close enough for a short-range shot." "That's suicide, Sergeant," Private Minho protested. "That thing will vaporize anyone who gets within 50 meters. Yunji looked around at her squad, seeing the same expression on every face. They were soldiers from Earth, trained in conflicts, where superior technology meant nothing if you couldn't adapt fast enough to survive. Every one of them had volunteered for this mission knowing they would face enemies far more advanced than anything humanity had ever fought. "No," she said firmly. "It's tactics. We do what humans have always done when facing superior technology. We improvise, we adapt, and we refuse to quit." Lieutenant Yun Seo's voice crackled over the radio from her position on the facility's far side. She had been wounded earlier in the battle, with energy burns across her left arm and damage to her armor's life support systems. By all reasonable standards, she should have been evacuated hours ago. "Sergeant, I have visual on the destroyer's rear approach. If someone can keep its attention focused forward, I can attempt a flanking maneuver." "Yun Seo, you're injured," Yunji replied. "You should fall back to the medical station." "With respect, Sergeant, falling back is not an option. That construct is learning to counter our weapons, but it hasn't learned to counter our tactics yet. We need to hit it from multiple directions before it figures out how to track all of us simultaneously." The wounded officer was already moving, using debris and destroyed facility structures as cover while she worked her way around the destroyer's position. Her damaged armor sparked occasionally, and her injured arm made weapon handling difficult, but she continued advancing with the methodical determination that had made human soldiers famous throughout their own world's history. "All units, this is Lieutenant Jae-hyun," came the voice of their field commander over the radio. "I'm coordinating with the retreating alien forces to provide supporting fire. When I give the signal, execute simultaneous attacks from all positions. We hit this thing with everything we have, all at once, from directions it can't predict." The destroyer had stopped advancing and was rotating slowly, its sensor arrays trying to track multiple human positions simultaneously. Its adaptive systems were processing combat data faster than any biological brain could function, but it was still struggling with the chaotic nature of human tactics. Every algorithm was designed to counter organized technological warfare, not the improvised chaos that humans called normal military operations. "Signal in 10 seconds, Jae-hyun announced. "Remember, we change tactics faster than it can learn. If something doesn't work, try something else immediately. Don't give it time to adapt." Tae-jun checked his improvised weapon one final time. The device looked like something a child might build from spare parts, but it contained enough explosive power to damage the destroyer's power systems if he could get close enough to use it. Yunji raised her rifle and targeted the construct's primary sensor cluster. Around the battlefield, 7 other human soldiers prepared their own attacks, each one different from the others, each one designed to create maximum confusion in the enemy's analytical systems. "Signal," Jae-hyun called. The human response came from 8 different directions simultaneously. Rifle shots, improvised explosives, thrown debris, and Lieutenant Yun Seo's flanking attack struck the destroyer within the span of 3 seconds. But most importantly, each attack was different from the last, following no pattern that the construct's learning algorithms could process. For the first time since the battle began, the massive war machine staggered backward, its systems overloaded by the sheer unpredictability of human warfare. The ground trembled beneath their feet as something massive moved deep inside the Void Swarm facility. Lieutenant Jae-hyun felt the vibration through his boots and instinctively checked his weapon. Around the battlefield, alien soldiers continued. Their advance toward the main entrance, their energy weapons cutting through smaller constructs with impressive efficiency. "All teams, this is Crystal Leader," General Vexthon's voice chimed through the communication system. "We are encountering heavier resistance inside the facility. Maintain your positions and prepare for possible reinforcement requests." From his position on the perimeter, Jae-hyun could see the Althari and Krelin forces moving through the facility's outer chambers. Their weapons created bright flashes of light as molecular disruptors and plasma bolts eliminated construct after construct. The alien soldiers moved with confident precision, their advanced armor allowing them to ignore most return fire. Then everything changed. A section of the facility's wall exploded outward in a shower of metal fragments and sparks. Through the gap emerged something that made every soldier on the battlefield freeze in recognition. The destroyer-class construct stood 15 feet tall and moved on 6 massive legs that could crush vehicles. Its hull gleamed with the dark shine of adaptive metal, while dozens of weapon ports dotted its surface like mechanical eyes. Destroyer-class enemy identified. War Marshal Zixtar's voice crackled over the radio, her usual confidence replaced by obvious concern. All units concentrate fire on primary target. The combined alien forces turned their weapons toward the massive construct. Molecular disruptors hummed at maximum power, while plasma weapons charged for full-intensity shots. The first volley struck the destroyer's hull with enough energy to vaporize a small building. For a moment, the construct seemed to stagger under the assault. Its armor plating showed signs of molecular breakdown, and several weapon ports sparked with electrical discharge. The alien soldiers pressed their advantage, pouring more energy into their target with systematic precision. But the destroyer was learning. Its hull began to shimmer and shift, the adaptive metal reorganizing itself at the molecular level. Within seconds, the surface became mirror smooth and started reflecting the alien energy weapons back toward their sources. Molecular disruptor beams bounced off the construct's armor and struck nearby rocks, dissolving them into component atoms. Plasma bolts ricocheted in random directions, forcing soldiers to dive for cover. Negative effect from energy weapons, one of the Crystal Warriors reported, his voice tight with confusion. Target is adapting faster than anticipated. The destroyer raised its primary weapon array, a collection of energy projectors that had been analyzing every shot fired at it. The return volley came as coherent beams of pure destruction that cut through the battlefield like invisible swords. The first beam struck an Althari warrior directly in the chest, and his crystalline body simply ceased to exist, vaporized so completely that not even dust remained. "Shields at maximum," a Kreelan shock trooper called out, but his nano-enhanced armor began sparking and failing as electromagnetic pulses from the destroyer overloaded its power systems. Another beam caught him as he tried to retreat, and his exoskeleton melted like plastic in a furnace. The alien forces found themselves in an impossible situation. Their advanced weapons had become useless against an enemy that could adapt to any energy-based attack. Worse, their high-tech armor and equipment made them easy targets for the destroyer's counter-systems. Every electronic component became a vulnerability as the construct's jamming signals overwhelmed their sophisticated systems. Private Min Ho watched the disaster unfold from his position behind a rocky outcropping. The alien soldiers who had mocked human technology just hours earlier were now retreating in panic, their superior equipment turned against them by an enemy they could not understand. "Sir," Minho said to Lieutenant Jae-hyun, "that thing is adapting to their energy weapons by analyzing the frequency patterns and molecular structure. But look at the small constructs we destroyed earlier." Jae-hyun followed Min-ho's pointing finger to where the spider-like constructs lay motionless. Unlike the machines destroyed by alien weapons, these constructs showed no signs of adaptation or learning. Their armor had been damaged by simple kinetic impacts that followed no predictable pattern. "You're right," Jae-hyun realized. "It can adapt to energy because energy follows rules. But a bullet's path can change because of wind. Gravity, tiny imperfections in the metal, too many variables for any computer to predict." The destroyer turned its attention toward the retreating alien forces, its weapon ports tracking multiple targets simultaneously. More energy beams lanced across the battlefield, and more soldiers simply vanished in flashes of coherent light. The construct moved forward with mechanical certainty, its adaptive systems now fully configured to counter every weapon the aliens possessed. "All teams, fall back to secondary positions," General Vexthon ordered, his crystalline voice showing stress fractures that made the translation system struggle. "Repeat, all teams withdraw immediately." But withdrawal was not an option for everyone. Sergeant Yoon-ji and her human squad found themselves cut off from the main retreat route by debris from the facility's destroyed outer wall. The destroyer's sensor array swiveled toward their position, red optical lenses focusing on the heat signatures of their crude armor. "Yoon-ji, get your people out of there!" Jae-hyun called over the radio. "Negative, sir. Path is blocked and that thing is coming right at us." Yoon-ji's voice remained calm, despite the impossible situation. She looked at her squad, 8 human soldiers with basic equipment facing a machine that had just defeated the galaxy's most advanced military forces. "What are your orders, Sergeant?" Corporal Tae-jun asked, checking his rifle's ammunition count out of habit. Yoon-ji studied the approaching destroyer, watching how it moved and analyzing its behavior patterns. The machine had adapted perfectly to alien technology, but it had never faced humans in actual combat. Every piece of data in its learning systems came from energy-based weapons and high-tech equipment. "We're going to do something that thing has never seen before," Yoon-ji said, raising her rifle and taking aim at the destroyer's sensor cluster. "We're going to fight dirty." The first shot rang out across the battlefield, a simple chemical explosion sending a metal projectile through thin atmosphere. The bullet struck the destroyer's hull and bounced off at an angle, creating a small impact crater but no significant damage. The construct's sensors swiveled toward the human position, analyzing this new type of attack. But the analysis produced confusing results. The projectile had no energy signature to track, no frequency. Pattern to counter, no molecular structure to dissolve. It was just metal moving through space according to basic physics, modified by countless tiny variables that defied prediction. More shots followed, each one slightly different from the last. Wind resistance changed the trajectory. Microscopic. Imperfections in the bullets altered their flight paths, and the soldiers' breathing affected their aim in ways no computer could calculate. The destroyer's adaptive systems tried to process this new information, but there was no pattern to learn from. "Keep firing," Yoon-ji ordered. "Aim for the sensor clusters and weapon ports. Don't let it figure out what we're doing," the human squad opened fire with disciplined volleys, their simple weapons creating chaos in the destroyer's learning algorithms. Each impact was different, each trajectory unpredictable, each result impossible to categorize. For the first time since the battle began, the massive construct showed signs of confusion, and in that confusion, Lieutenant Jae-hyun saw humanity's chance to prove that sometimes the best technology was the soldier who refused to give up. 3 months passed, like a blur of training exercises and preparation drills. The Joint Vanguard Fleet hung in space above the burned remains of the Kepler 442 system, a collection of warships from dozens of different worlds. Each vessel represented the pinnacle of its species' technology, bristling with weapons that could crack planets and shields that could deflect stellar radiation. Lieutenant Jae-hyun stood in the cramped transport bay of the human carrier ship Incheon, checking his equipment. One final time. Around him, 40 other human soldiers prepared for their first real combat alongside alien forces. Their ceramic armor looked dull and primitive compared to the gleaming exoskeletons worn by their alien counterparts, but each piece had been tested in countless Earth conflicts. The transport bay doors opened with a mechanical grinding sound, revealing the target of their mission. A small moon orbited the dead world of Kepler 442b, its surface covered in twisted metal structures that grew like cancer across the rocky landscape. Void swarm processing facilities extended deep underground, converting planetary matter into raw materials for more war machines. "Listen up," Jae-hyun called to his soldiers. His voice carried easily through their helmet communicators, a simple radio system that had worked reliably for decades. "Intelligence reports show light resistance on the surface level. Our job is to secure the outer perimeter while our alien friends handle the heavy lifting inside." Private Minho adjusted his rifle strap and looked through the transport window at the moon below. "Sir, why are we getting perimeter duty? Shouldn't we be going in with the main assault force?" Jae-hyun almost smiled at the question. He had wondered. The same thing during the mission briefing. "Command thinks we're better suited for support roles, Minho. Apparently, our equipment isn't advanced enough for the real fighting. Through the transport's communication system, they could hear radio, chatter from the alien strike teams. Althari crystal warriors spoke in their chiming voices about molecular disruptor settings, while Krelin shock troops discussed nano-enhancement calibrations. Every conversation emphasized the technological superiority of their weapons and armor systems. The transport shuddered as it entered the moon's thin atmosphere. Through the window, the soldiers could see other dropships descending toward the surface. Sleek Althari vessels moved like liquid mercury, their hulls shifting and flowing as they adapted to atmospheric conditions. Krelin assault pods fell like dark meteors, their surfaces crackling with electrical discharges that cleared debris from their path. The human transport landed with a heavy thud that rattled every soldier inside. No smooth atmospheric adaptation or electrical discharge systems. Just mechanical brakes and shock absorbers that had been designed on Earth 50 years earlier. The loading ramp dropped with a loud clang, revealing the alien landscape beyond. Jae-hyun led his soldiers out onto the moon's surface. The gravity felt lighter than Earth normal, making each step bounce slightly. The air tasted metallic through their breathing filters, and the sky showed the wrong color of stars. But the ground beneath their boots felt solid and familiar, reminding each soldier of training exercises back home. 50 meters away, an Althari strike team emerged from their transport. The crystal warriors moved with fluid grace, their transparent, bodies refracting the pale sunlight into rainbow patterns. Their molecular disruptors hummed with contained energy, and their nano-enhanced armor shifted and flowed like living metal. Each warrior stood 8 feet tall and moved with the confidence of beings who had never lost a battle. "Primitive humans," one of the Althari said, his voice carrying clearly across the radio frequencies. "Try to stay behind us and avoid interfering with real soldiers." A Krelin shock trooper team landed nearby, their assault pod creating a small crater in the rocky surface. The insect-like warriors emerged in perfect formation, their weapons crackling with electrical energy. Their exoskeletons gleamed with the dull shine of military-grade composites, and each movement generated small sparks from their power systems. "Human soldiers," the Krelin team leader clicked through the translator system. "Maintain safe distance from combat zone. Your primitive weapons may cause interference with advanced targeting systems." Jae-hyun gritted his teeth but kept his voice professional. "Understood. We'll secure the outer positions as ordered." The combined forces moved toward the Void Swarm facility, a twisted structure that looked like a mechanical forest growing from the moon's surface. Metallic branches reached toward the sky while root-like extensions burrowed deep into the rock below. The entire structure pulsed with red lights that seemed to follow some alien heartbeat. As they approached the facility's outer defenses, the first void constructs appeared. These machines looked like metallic spiders, each one the size of a small vehicle. Their legs ended in cutting tools and energy weapons, while their bodies contained processing units that analyzed threats and adapted countermeasures in real time. The Althari warriors opened fire first. Their molecular disruptors sent beams of coherent energy toward the approaching constructs. The weapons worked exactly as designed, breaking down the molecular bonds in the enemy armor and causing entire sections of metal to simply dissolve. 3 constructs collapsed within seconds, their legs folding as their structural integrity failed. The Krelin shock troops followed with their own assault. Plasma bolts streaked across the battlefield, each one carrying enough energy to melt through solid steel. Their targeting systems locked onto the constructs with perfect accuracy, and their enhanced reflexes allowed them to dodge return fire. With ease, 5 more constructs fell to their coordinated attack. "See how real soldiers fight," one of the crystal warriors transmitted over the radio. "Human primitive weapons would barely scratch these machines." Jae-hyun watched the alien forces advance with impressive efficiency. Their technology clearly outmatched anything humanity could produce. The molecular disruptors and plasma weapons cut through enemy armor like it was paper, while their advanced defenses deflected most return fire. Within minutes, they had cleared the outer perimeter and were advancing toward the facility's main entrance. The human soldiers took their assigned positions around the landing zone, setting up what their alien allies considered glorified guard duty. Minho knelt behind a rocky outcropping and aimed his rifle toward the facility's side passages. The weapon felt heavy in his hands compared to the energy weapons carried by their allies, but it had never failed him during training exercises. "Contact on the east approach," Corporal Tae-jun called over the radio. His voice carried the calm professionalism that came from years of Earth military service. "3 constructs moving toward our position." Jae-hyun raised his rifle and peered through the simple optical scope. The approaching constructs looked different from the ones the aliens had fought earlier. These machines moved with more purpose, their red optical sensors scanning the battlefield with mechanical precision. They had apparently learned from observing the previous battle. "Weapons free," Jae-hyun ordered. "Let's show these machines what human soldiers can do." The first shots rang out across the battlefield. Simple chemical propellants sent metal projectiles flying through the thin atmosphere. The bullets struck the leading construct's armor plating with sharp impacts, leaving small dents and scratches, rather than the complete destruction caused by alien energy weapons. But something unexpected happened. The construct stumbled slightly. As the bullets hit, its movement becoming less coordinated. More shots followed, each one adding to the cumulative damage. Unlike the clean molecular dissolution caused by Althari weapons, the human bullets created unpredictable patterns of structural stress. The construct's adaptive systems seemed confused by the kinetic impacts. Its armor began reconfiguring to deflect energy weapons, but the physical bullets followed different rules entirely. They bounced at unexpected angles, created vibrations through the machine's frame, and damaged components in ways that defied logical analysis. Within 30 seconds, all 3 constructs lay motionless on the rocky ground. Not dissolved like the machines destroyed by alien weapons, but damaged beyond function by hundreds of small impacts that had overwhelmed their adaptive capabilities. Jae-hyun lowered his rifle and looked at the battlefield with new eyes. Maybe human technology wasn't as primitive as everyone thought. The massive doors of the Galactic Defense Command chamber slid open with a soft hiss. Commander Hyunwoo stepped forward, his black military boots clicking against the polished metal floor. Behind him walked Captain So Young, carrying a heavy case filled with human technology samples. Both wore their finest dress uniforms, dark blue with silver trim that caught the artificial light streaming from the ceiling panels above. The chamber stretched out before them like a vast arena. Circular rows of seats rose up from the center floor, each tier designed to accommodate different alien species. The air smelled strange to human noses, a mixture of ozone, methane, and something sweet that neither soldier could identify. Translator. Devices hummed softly throughout the room, converting dozens of alien languages into understandable speech. At the highest tier sat the most powerful beings in known space. General Vexthon of the Althari Empire leaned forward in his crystal chair. His body looked like living diamond, refracting light into rainbow patterns across his transparent skin. Each movement created tiny chiming sounds as his crystalline joints moved against each other. His eyes glowed with cold blue light as he examined the approaching humans. Beside him perched War Marshal Zixtar of the Krelin Hives. Her insect-like body stood 7 feet tall, covered in dark green carapace that gleamed like polished metal. 4 arms ended in razor-sharp claws, while her compound eyes tracked every movement in the chamber. When she spoke, her mandibles clicked together, creating harsh sounds that the translators struggled to convert into smooth words. Dozens of other species filled the remaining seats. Gaseous beings floated in containment suits, tentacled creatures wrapped around specially designed perches, and robotic representatives whose metal bodies sparked with electric patterns. All of them watched the two humans, with expressions ranging from mild curiosity to barely hidden amusement. Commander Hyunwoo stopped at the center podium and activated the holographic display system. The air above his head shimmered and formed into the blue and green sphere of Earth, rotating slowly in the artificial light. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," he began, his voice steady despite the intimidating audience. "I am Commander Hyunwoo of the Terran Defense Corps. We come before you today to request membership in the Vanguard Strike Force." A wave of chittering laughter swept through the chamber. The sound came from dozens of different species, each expressing amusement in their own way. Crystal beings chimed like wind chimes, while gaseous entities created bubbling sounds within their containment suits. General Vexthon raised one transparent hand, and the laughter gradually faded. "Human Commander," he said, his voice carrying the sound of breaking glass. "Your species has been part of the galactic community for barely 50 years. The Vanguard Strike Force represents the finest military units in known space. What makes you believe your primitive world could contribute to our operations?" Commander Hyunwoo had expected this question. He nodded to Captain So Young, who stepped forward and began opening her equipment case. "We understand your concerns, General. However, humanity has extensive experience in warfare and military operations. Our technology may appear simple, but it has proven effective in countless conflicts on our home world." Captain So Young lifted the first item from her case. The body armor looked crude compared to the sleek equipment used by most galactic species. Made from ceramic composite plates and thick fabric, it resembled something a medieval knight might wear if given access to modern materials. The helmet featured a simple face shield and basic communication equipment. "This is our standard infantry protection system," So Young explained, holding up the armor for all to see. "The ceramic plates can stop most projectile weapons, while the underlying fabric provides additional protection against energy weapons and environmental hazards." War Marshal Zixtar's mandibles clicked together in what the translator interpreted as scornful laughter. "Captain, our soldiers wear nano-enhanced exoskeletons that can withstand direct hits from starship weapons. Your armor appears to be constructed from the same materials your ancestors used to make pottery." More laughter echoed through the chamber. An 8-legged creature in the third tier called out, "Do humans still throw rocks at their enemies?" This comment triggered another wave of amusement from the assembled aliens. Captain So Young maintained her composure and reached for the next item. She pulled out a rifle that looked almost ancient compared to the energy weapons carried by most galactic species. The weapon featured a long metal barrel, wooden stock, and mechanical trigger system. No glowing power cells or plasma conduits decorated its surface. "This is our primary infantry weapon," she continued. "It fires solid projectiles using chemical propulsion. The bullets travel at approximately 1,000 meters per second and can penetrate most armor systems." The laughter grew even louder. General Vexthon stood from his crystal throne, his body casting rainbow patterns across the chamber. "Walls, Captain, my personal guard carries molecular disruptors that can dissolve enemy soldiers at the atomic level. Your weapon appears to function on the same principles used by your species 500 years ago." A blob-like entity near the back of the chamber gurgled something that the translator rendered as, "Next, they will show us pointed sticks and sharp rocks." Commander Hyunwoo felt heat rising in his cheeks, but he forced himself to remain calm. Captain So Young lifted the final piece of equipment, a small device that looked like a metal backpack with glowing panels on its surface. "Our energy shield generator," she said. "It creates a defensive barrier that can absorb approximately 50,000 joules of energy before requiring recharge." This announcement caused the loudest laughter yet. War Marshal Zixtar's entire body shook as her mandibles clicked rapidly together. 50,000 joules, she managed between fits of amusement. "My personal shield system can absorb 50 million joules without strain. Human technology appears to be several centuries behind current galactic standards." General Vexathon returned to his seat, still chiming with crystalline laughter. Commander Hyunwoo, we appreciate your enthusiasm, but surely you understand that the Vanguard Strike Force requires advanced technology and proven military capability. Your equipment would be useless against the threats we face. The chamber fell silent as all eyes focused on the two humans standing at the center podium. Commander Hyunwoo looked around the vast room, seeing the same expression on every alien face. They viewed humanity as primitive children playing with toys, unfit for serious military operations. However, before he could respond, an urgent alarm began sounding throughout the chamber. Red lights flashed along the walls while a mechanical voice announced, "Priority alert. Void swarm activity detected in the Kepler 442 system. All Vanguard units report for immediate deployment briefing." The laughter died instantly. Every alien representative straightened in their seats as the gravity of the situation became clear. The Void Swarm represented the greatest threat to galactic civilization, a mechanical plague that consumed entire worlds and converted their mass into more war machines. General Vexthon's glowing eyes fixed on Commander Hyunwoo. "It appears circumstances have changed, human. We require every available soldier for this operation, regardless of their technological limitations." His voice carried reluctant acceptance rather than respect. "Your request for Vanguard membership is approved, but understand that we expect little from your primitive forces." War Marshal Zixtar clicked her mandibles together one final time. "Try not to get in the way of real soldiers, humans. Leave the actual fighting to species with proper equipment." As the chamber began emptying, Commander Hyunwoo and Captain So Young gathered their equipment. They had achieved their goal of joining the Vanguard Strike Force, but at the cost of becoming a laughingstock among the galaxy's military elite. Neither soldier spoke as they left the chamber, both knowing that humanity would need to prove itself in the upcoming battle against the Void Swarm. The war would show whether advanced technology truly made better soldiers, or if there were other qualities that mattered more in combat.